Okay, greeting. We should start because the later on the Bosko portion is hands-on. Your side may need to take some time for you to really hands-on and then spend some time to really do some. First of all, I'm really thank you from all of you who are interested. Is why that we make the event possible. We done together with the DefenseCode. As usual, if you previously have been attend any of our event before, all the content that for the material we already putting into the e-learning system that you can interactively access, just like later on like what I would do also. From the password is basically is espin, ESPIN _ then D capitals DefenseCode at 2021. The ID to log in is exactly is your registered full email address. You can download the content. I will expect that also from the Q&A. Why will later on in the quite the end part, you may have certain question want to ask the Bosko on certain things. If there is a scenario, then those things I will update it into the Q&A. Afterward, you just download the fully completed version I use as a PDF reference. Now I will be moving directly into system. If we use before. So actually, all the section here already integrated putting in here already, inclusive of some of the content the Bosko it give me want me to putting in. I put in here as well. Without further delay, let's get started. As a welcome, I will have a short video record for about 2 minutes to welcome everyone.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you to attend for this special event, special arranged with the our honorable supplier, DefenseCode. This is the not the very traditional one-way presentation in the passive way that you will be attend, like most of it that I think from the past 1.5 years in less than an hour or so. Instead, it is my pleasure to working out on these sections with the Bosko, the instructor for today's workshop event, represented from the DefenseCode for their secure code review in practice as a skill set. You will learn firsthand with the Bosko. For more the detail how he will be sharing about doing those things using the tool, right? I will let the Bosko to talk in more detail for the coming section with you directly, while I serving as the opener for the event. So once again, thank you for attending. So I will talk with you again at the end of the event to closing it, and at the same time to let's have the lucky draw at that time, right? So please enjoy the event and thank you for participation. It is my pleasure to arrange this with the supplier, the DefenseCode, together to make it possible that is meaningful. At least in such a way, it's more meaningful that you learn something in the end. So for your, please enjoy. Thank you.
Yes, Bosko, I will passing you the control so that you can share your screen to guide them. Here you go.
Okay, you should be seeing the presentation slide. Today we will be talking about application security in continuous integration and continuous deployment, or CI/CD. Specifically shifting left with static application security tools, or SAST. The major part of today's presentation is going to be a practical demonstration of SAST. I will use the following couple of slides solely to set the scene and present the problem. that we are trying to solve here. Everyone will also have a chance for a hands-on access to a DefenseCode SAST solution, so I hope the demonstration that I will provide of the usage of the tool will be enough for you to find your way when you access the solution, initiate scans on your own, review the scans, and see how the tool works in practice. What is shifting left? Shifting left is a DevOps approach that calls for testing software early and often. Shift left integrates testing into your DevOps pipeline so that issues are detected early when they are easier and less expensive to fix. So it makes sense to think that the sooner a problem can be discovered, the sooner and the easier is to fix. If a security vulnerability isn't discovered until the code is compiled and the application is ready to be released, it's a significant disruption and burden in terms of time and money to have to go back to make the fix, retest the application, perform user acceptance testing again, and so on. But outside of the actual development time and costs, the greatest consequence of a delayed detection is a data breach caused by a malicious actors exploiting vulnerabilities, which can be very, very costly to an organization. We are talking about things like compromised personal identifiable information of your customers, your intellectual property, your employee information, and other sensitive data, where the longer the issues remain undetected, the cost increases. According to IBM's most recent cost of a data breach report of 2021, featuring research by the Ponemon Institute, the global average data breach cost is $4.24 million. Last year it was $3.86 million. So although the numbers vary by countries and regions, a data breach is too costly in any of these. It can also depend on your industry, like healthcare, financial, technology, energy, services. In any case, software development lifecycle, secure software development lifecycle is a part of a data breach prevention, and as such, you cannot afford not to have it in your organization. A single vulnerability such as a SQL injection can compromise user data. As you remember, for example, in a LinkedIn breach of 2012, it was a single SQL injection vulnerability that caused 167 million users to be exposed due to that single vulnerability that could have been prevented with shifting left and detecting those kind of issues early in the development process. Aside from the actual costs, in modern DevOps processes, speed and efficiency are the key. So there are organizations out there that have a dozen or hundreds of deployments to production daily. They cannot afford to slow down, and because both speed and efficiency require automation, integration, and collaboration, security is often compromised for speed and cost. So how do we resolve that problem? So the solution is to turn DevOps into security ops without sacrificing automation. So you need to onboard SAST tools or static application security tools into the coding and build processes to test your code early and often. By making security part of the development process, this raises security awareness in the organization and teams. So, for example, if a build gets stopped once because of a security vulnerability, developers might learn from it for future development, but they might not. If it gets continually stopped across different gated checks, they start developing with a security mindset. The illustration that you see here represents what an ideal implementation of application security in a CI/CD pipeline looks like. It illustrates 3 points. You should shift left as much as possible in the development process. This means right during the development time, and you follow it with gated checks across the pipeline to code pushes and commits in repositories, into builds, into runtime testing, and that cycle continues continuously. With pre-commit checks, which would be the furthest left you can actually shift the security. That is a security testing while developing inside the integrated development environments. So developers have a close and close to a real-time code security feedback from the right tools. So if I'm writing code and I want to check that the code that I've written so far is secure, I would run a quick scan. The SAST tool would report any potential vulnerabilities, recommend a fix for that vulnerability. I would issue a fix or mitigate the vulnerability and continue developing. So all of that happens before I actually commit the code to the repository and have it reviewed by other members of the team. We will show how this ID integration of SAST tools look like with DefenseCode SAST solutions in a couple of minutes from now. Now, with pre-commit checks, the decision whether to run a security check on their code is up to developers. I mean, if they can't be bothered with it or do not consider it important at that time, or they simply forget, they might not run it. So this is why you need to prevent them from committing and pushing the code into development branches that might be merged into production. Now, this part is fully automated. A SaaS solution is integrated directly into version control services or source code management systems to trigger a security scan whenever an event such as a code commit and push happens. So developers cannot decide if they are going to run this scan. It happens automatically. And if the code fails the test, it cannot be merged further. The same applies to build systems. The code will not be built and pushed forward to runtime testing or deployment if it fails security checks. Now, the takeaways from these points so far. So, as the software development stages progress, the cost of addressing any uncovered bugs or security issues also rises, often exponentially. So we need to shift left to prevent these problems early. We need to use automation to allow the security to be seamlessly implemented or introduced into a software development lifecycle. If everything is a manual process, it will significantly slow down the processes, and the security will simply not be adopted in the organization. So we need to use that automation provided by a SaaS tool. Good SaaS tools can cover all of the stages that we talked about, like pre-commit stages, on-commit stages, build stages in a CI/CD pipeline, to prevent the deployment of insecure code, depending on how you actually implement the tool in the pipeline. DefenseCode provides two application security solutions. These are ThunderScan, which is a static application security testing solution, and Webstrike, which is a dynamic application security testing or a DAST tool. ThunderScan SAST tool, you can use it to scan millions of lines of code across 30 different programming languages and various programming frameworks within hours or even minutes. It can scale the actual scanning capability, concurrency of scanning. You can automate the actual scaling. It supports different compliance standards and reporting such as PCI DSS and CWE Top 25, OWASP Top 10, HIPAA High Trust, NIST, and other. As you will see, in a minute. It's really easy to use. It has a very powerful REST API as well, which allows us to create various clients for it, such as IDE extensions to initiate scans over the IDEs, to have clients that can be called upon from different build systems to integrate into build processes as well. You can use the API to actually interact with it yourself by creating script calls to the API if you do not want to use ThunderScan provided clients. So now we will actually switch to the actual tool. Allow me to quickly go back to ThunderScan here. So I will go from the actual login here. As you will see in your access that will be provided on a live instance of ThunderScan, you will log in with your user account. You are presented with the dashboard once you log in. The dashboard represents scan management in terms of searching through scans, filtering them by date times, risk levels, scan statuses, scan names. You can review the risk levels of recently ran scans. You can see what languages those scans were ran against. The dashboard also has another view called Applications. Applications represent a grouping of scans for the purpose of having an entire scan history of a specific project or an application, such as a specific Git repository. It would provide you with the high-level information, such as the latest scan delta, how many vulnerabilities were introduced since the latest scan, how many vulnerabilities were mitigated, how many vulnerability types do you have, total vulnerabilities over time, latest statistics in terms of high, medium, low, some compliance violations depending on how the configuration is set up for the application. The dashboard also has an organizational-wide analytics view where you can overview your top vulnerable application, top vulnerable types, scans per language, ratio between static analysis and software composition analysis results, remediation progress across time, different compliance violations for different standards across the entire organization and all the application scans, as you can see here. Now, before creating a new scan and showing how to triage results and go through those results of a scan, I will go through some of the administrative and per user settings just to highlight some of the features of the solution. So, ThunderScan is a multi-user environment. You can create new users, you can create user groups, you can assign different roles to users such as administrator, scan management, group scan management, read-only roles, scan initiation roles. So you have that separation of roles where developers might use scan management roles, security teams, or someone who just needs a summary report of a scan or the entire organizational-wide analytics would use a read-only account because they only need to review those reports. You can also integrate ThunderScan into LDAP or single sign-on through SAML authentication and OpenID Connect authentication. You can map specific attributes of both LDAP and SAML and OpenID to ThunderScan roles and ThunderScan groups. By default, ThunderScan uses a queue system of scanning. So if you have a scan currently running and you initiate another scan, that new scan will be processed only after the current one finishes. But if that does not meet the scaling requirements of an organization, you can deploy any number of ThunderScan scanning agents. Agents represent horizontal scaling in terms of adding more machines to the pool of resources. So let's say you have a need for 10 parallel scans at any time. You can deploy 10 agents, and the queue will be delegated to those 10 agents so that you can achieve 10 parallel scans at any time. ThunderScan is entirely cross-platform, so you can deploy these agents or the ThunderScan itself on Linux, Windows, containerized deployments such as Docker. There are multiple options of actual deployment of the solution. In per-user settings that we see here, we have version control systems. Currently supported ones are Git, SVN, Team Foundation Server Version Control, Mercurial, Amazon S3 buckets are also supported as scanning targets. When you configure version control systems by providing credentials to access a specific repository hosting, you will be able to use repository URLs as scanning targets in ThunderScan. ThunderScan also supports issue tracking directly integrated and available out of the box with Atlassian Jira, Azure DevOps Perk items, GitHub issues, and Redmine issue tracking system as well. You are able, as you will soon see, to submit a ticket for an individual vulnerability, or you can set up an automated issue submission through what we call triggers. Triggers represent a condition that is evaluated at the end of the scan, such as we can set up multiple conditions like notify me with an issue submission if a scan results in more than one high-risk vulnerability, for example. ThunderScan will evaluate the results at the end of the scan. If it matches any of the selected triggers, it will automatically submit a complete report of the scan to a ticket summary of the scanning, so you can get notified directly from the ThunderScan environment. The same goes for standard notifications. Currently supported notifications are email and Slack. You can also create those triggers that we talked about. You can choose to attach a report automatically to an email notification, so you can receive ThunderScan reports through email as well when the scans are finished, if they are, let's say, initiated from some kind of a integrated process and not manually. ThunderScan is also fully API enabled. You can generate per user API tokens. You can use those tokens to authenticate to the API, interact with it, start any scans, generate reports, or perform other permitted actions. When creating a new scan, we have a few options to go through. So creating a new scan is done by clicking on New in the left side menu. The basic information needed for the scan is the actual name of the scan. We are going to name it a demo scan here. Then we have a language selection for the project. You can choose to select one or multiple languages, or you can let ThunderScan automatically recognize the programming languages in the project by selecting the auto language recognition option, in which case ThunderScan will automatically recognize the languages based on the file extensions in the project, and it will produce a consolidated report in the results view. Once the language is selected and the scan is named, we can select the actual target of the scan. Multiple target types are supported. For example, you can upload the source code as a zip archive target. You can provide ThunderScan with a repository URL like Git, or you can specify a specific branch that you want to scan if you want to. You can specify an SVN repository, Team Foundation Server Version Control, Mercurial, Amazon S3 bucket object, local path on the same server where ThunderScan is running if that is enabled in the solution. For this demo, and you will also see that when you access ThunderScan yourself, there are a couple of uploaded projects already, and we will select one of those for further demonstration. At this point, we could start a scan, which would run a default ThunderScan scan against the project, but we will proceed to more options just to review what configuration exists for the actual scan. If an individual language is selected, we will have a configuration of vulnerability types that are supported for the selected language. So you can choose to exclude any of these vulnerability types from the analysis, and they won't be shown in the final result. For example, you might prioritize only high and medium risk issues and not care about low risk issues, or you don't care about specific issue in any of these risks here. On the right side, we have tracked input variables. These represent any function or a property that might take user input from some source. As ThunderScan does a deep taint analysis, it will actually track any user manipulable input through the entire application data flow. So it will see how the certain, let's say, HTTP parameter value was passed on to variables through function calls. It will track it and check if that unsanitized user input lands into a sensitive sync function that might cause a vulnerability. For example, it will track an input and checking if it lands into a database call. Is it a part of an SQL query if it's done in an insecure manner? On the bottom here, we have custom filtering functions and custom vulnerability rules. These represent further adjustments to a scan to further tweak an analysis. For example, custom filtering functions would let ThunderScan know the name of an input sanitization function that you have in your application source code. For example, let's say you decided to mitigate cross-site scripting vulnerabilities by eliminating special characters from the input, characters that are used in cross-site scripting attacks. You wrote a function for that, and you will let ThunderScan know the name of that function and the type of vulnerability it mitigates. So if ThunderScan detects the input going through that function, it will not report a vulnerability because it would be a false positive result. ThunderScan will, however, detect all the default language provided filters such as HTML encoders. It will detect string to integer conversion, so you don't have to define those. Only if you created some kind of a custom input sanitization function where you are doing something with the input that mitigates a vulnerability, you will let ThunderScan know that that function is used. Custom vulnerability rules. In case you are working with some kind of a custom framework, maybe it's built in-house, so ThunderScan currently doesn't support it. You can define function signatures, sync function signatures. So if ThunderScan detects an unsanitized user input landing into a specific function that you define, it will report a vulnerability for the vulnerability type that you defined for that custom rule. In final options here, we have the actual depth of the scan in terms of tracking the user input through function calls and variable copying. On the right side, we have path exclusions, which allow you to exclude any part of the project from the analysis. So you maybe have some kind of test code in your project that might produce findings, but that the code is irrelevant to the actual production application. You can exclude those parts of the code from the analysis. In ThunderScan, you have an option of suppressing any vulnerability finding. That suppression might be an accepted risk, it might be a false positive result. But once a vulnerability is suppressed, the signature of that vulnerability is stored in ThunderScan database, and in future scans over the same source code base, you can choose to ignore previously stored suppressions. So ThunderScan will be able to recognize them in future scans, and it will not report them as issues. So once something is suppressed, you can choose to ignore it in future scans and not seeing it again, as you will soon see when we triage the results. Here you can also select the issue submission triggers that we talked about when we reviewed those notifications. You could start a scan, but you can also create a schedule of a scan to run at a specific time or an interval based on a cron expression that you can define and select here. You can also save the scan configuration as a scanning template, which can then be reused by other groups of users, or you can simply hit start and run the scan. What ThunderScan is doing right now is unpacking the uploaded archive and starting the source code analysis. This is a summary view of the scan. The summary view will show you the current duration of the scan, the total number of files that are analyzed, the total number of code lines that are analyzed. It will also show all the vulnerability types discovered during the analysis with counts for each of the vulnerability types. If we scroll down further, it will also show violations to compliance standards such as OWASP Top 10, PCI DSS, NIST, HIPAA, HITRUST, KPAC, CWE Top 25, and other. If we proceed to the details of the scan, which is located in the Details tab, we can see all the vulnerability findings in the tree view on the left side here. To review individual vulnerabilities, we can select an individual vulnerability finding, and we have individual vulnerability details displayed here. Individual vulnerability contains information such as what was the function call that received an unsanitized user input that caused a vulnerability, how that function can be abused, in this case to perform a SQL injection attack, what was the input variable or the input source where the user input originated, what is the vulnerable project file where this sync call is located, a vulnerability description, violations to compliance standards for that specific vulnerability, general mitigation recommendations for the vulnerability type with references to external resources. To further inspect a vulnerability, we have a data flow tab here that shows the entire data flow of a vulnerability. So we can see that the user input started in the text email text variable. If we click on that, we are led to the complete source code highlighting. It shows that the text email text variable was passed on to the get security questions and answer function. That function takes an email string parameter, as we can see here, and that email parameter was used to insecurely concatenate as a part of a SQL query, which is saved into a SQL string variable, and that variable was passed on to the function call that actually causes a SQL injection vulnerability. Now, the summary tab of an individual vulnerability contains a high-level description of that data flow that we just went through. So it will describe it in a high-level manner, like it will say where the tainted input was received, in what line of what file. It will show a snippet of that line, show how the value was passed on further, show how it was passed to different values, and finally passed unsanitized into that sensitive sync function, causing a high-risk SQL injection vulnerability. So this level of information is available for every vulnerability type supported in ThunderScan. From the details view, in case we decide a vulnerability to be a false positive result, we can suppress a vulnerability finding by clicking on the suppression icon, which is the flag icon either in the details view or next to the actual individual vulnerability in the left side tree view. So we can suppress a vulnerability finding. We can type in a suppression comment such as a false positive, although this is not, of course, a false positive result. And once that suppression is made, in future scans over the same source code base, you can choose to never see those findings again. So ThunderScan is able to adapt to your source code. The more you triage the results, eliminate false positives, it will be able to recognize them in future scans. In case you encounter those false positive results, although the false positive rate in ThunderScan is really low, it will be able to adapt it the more you actually use the tool. From here, you can also change the risk of an individual vulnerability or the entire vulnerability type. For example, you might not consider, let's say, cross-site scripting vulnerabilities to be medium risk vulnerabilities. You might consider them to be high, or you consider a specific issue to be a higher or a lower risk than what is proposed. You have an option of actually changing that risk. From here, you can also choose to submit an issue to one of the supported issue tracking systems, such as Jira. If Jira is configured, all your projects will be automatically fetched here, all the supported issue types, assignable users, and you have an option of adding a comment to the ticket as well. So if we submit that ticket, we can see how that ticket looks once it's submitted to Jira. So ThunderScan will submit a ticket that looks like this. So it will show all the relevant information, vulnerable project files, the entire data flow, a summary of the data flow with those code snippets, descriptions, how the vulnerability was passed on. It will submit mitigation recommendations, references to external resources. Your comments, if you typed any, will also be submitted in the ticket. So this way you can immediately interact with your issue tracking system, submitting issues directly from the ThunderScan environment. You don't have to point your developers or users to a specific ThunderScan scan. You can simply submit issues, and they will have it in an environment that they are already familiar with. If we submit the same to, let's say, GitHub, because it's also supported, let's submit an issue to a repository, give it a issue label here, and we submit it. We can review that submitted issue in GitHub as part of the issues submitted for the project, in the same manner that we saw in Jira. Now, as ThunderScan has a rich API that enables us and you to create various clients for it. One of such clients are our IDE extensions that we mentioned as part of the pre-commit stage in pipeline integration. So we have a Visual Studio environment here with the ThunderScan extension already installed. You can create scans in the same manner from the development environment as we saw in the web user interface of ThunderScan. So we have vulnerability types, track input variables, miscellaneous settings. Everything is present in the same manner as it is in the web user interface. And all you need to do while developing an application is to hit a start for the scan. ThunderScan extension will submit the project to the ThunderScan server. It will retrieve the results as soon as they are available, which is usually really quickly, especially when talking about incremental scanning. You can review the results directly in the IDE environment because ThunderScan will highlight all the relevant code lines. So if we select the same vulnerability that we did in the web user interface demonstration, we can see that it highlights all the relevant lines. When clicking to the actual data flow, we can choose where to place a mitigation for that vulnerability based on the mitigation recommendations. And then once the vulnerability is fixed, we can initiate another scan during our development process. So again, to make a note of that, the decision to start a scan is entirely up to developers. Other gated checks would actually prevent developers from submitting an insecure code. For example, we have a GitHub repository here that is connected with a Circle CI build system. Circle CI is supported in ThunderScan. We have what they call Circle CI orbs, which are configurable pieces of information. We have that ThunderScan orb included there. We have the configuration of the project configured as break a build if it reaches one or more high-risk vulnerabilities. Provide a report in HTML and JSON formats, and attach those reports as artifacts of the build. So back to that repository, if we introduce a vulnerability, like this project already contains a vulnerability, but I just want to show you what happens when we make a commit to that vulnerability. Let's say we introduce some insecure code in this application, and we hit commit changes. What that will do, it will automatically trigger a scan in ThunderScan against that repository. As you can see here, it's running a ThunderScan scan automatically, which was triggered by the code commit to the repository. And the build failed because the ThunderScan scan resulted in one high-risk vulnerability, which was the threshold that we set in the project configuration. So ThunderScan can be easily integrated into these kind of build systems where you can set thresholds to actually break the build, set up triggers to initiate the scans based on the developer behavior, whether that is code pushes or other actions performed by developers. You can trigger a scan at any time based on that. We have another build system here, which is Azure DevOps, made by Microsoft. ThunderScan integration is configured in a similar manner. You configure your pipeline script to download the ThunderScan command line client. You need to check out the repository, initiate a scan. It will trigger on any commits to master branch here. For example, if we edit the repository, just one second. Let's edit any kind of file. This is an already vulnerable project, so that we can simply show you how a change is committed. We can see that it will automatically run a new pipeline. As you can see here, it's running a new pipeline job. It checks out the repository, downloads ThunderScan client, and initiates a ThunderScan scan. It packages the target source code, uploads it to ThunderScan server, initiates a scan. Scan is successfully started. It waits for ThunderScan results, and if ThunderScan scan results in more then one high-risk vulnerability, this pipeline job will actually fail because that's the threshold that we set for the scan. As you can see, it's marked red. The actual build failed because of the threshold that we set. We get a nice summary of vulnerabilities there. We get exported HTML reports as artifacts, so we can see that those artifacts are getting uploaded at the moment from ThunderScan. The same is with Circle CI that we previously seen. ThunderScan reports are automatically generated as artifacts. For example, if we open a ThunderScan report, we can see how it looks like. So on the first page of the report of the Circle CI scan that we had with those vulnerabilities, we can see found vulnerabilities, breakdown of those vulnerabilities by severity. We can see vulnerability coverage, or what vulnerability types were scanned for. We can see the report detailing descriptions, mitigation recommendations, references, all the information relevant to individual vulnerabilities, the user input flow of each vulnerability, risk separation, color-coded risk separation in reports. Coming back to the ThunderScan environment, to create a report directly from the ThunderScan environment, there is a Create Report button in the upper right corner. You can generate reports in various formats such as HTML, PDF, XML, JSON, comma-separated values, or serif reports, which are standardized SAST reports consumed by various tools. When you select the format, you can select different report types. ThunderScan supports like a DefenseCode default type, as well as compliance reports such as OWASP Top 10, SANS CWE 25, NIST, PCI DSS, HIPAA, HITRUST, and KPAC. We will select the DefenseCode default here. We can choose to generate a technical report, a short technical report, a summary report. So if we generate a technical, we can see how that report looks like again. So we have that entire summary of found vulnerabilities, chart breakdown, vulnerability coverage, descriptions, all the vulnerability details with function call stacks and user input flow. So all the information needed to find the vulnerability and mitigate it based on the results exported from ThunderScan alone. Just 1 second. ThunderScan has a full documentation for various integrations into various IDEs. Currently supported IDEs are Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, Eclipse, all the IntelliJ-based IDEs such as WebStorm, PHPStorm, PyCharm, Golang, Android Studio. All of those are supported through ThunderScan extensions. It can integrate into multiple CI/CD pipelines such as Azure DevOps, AWS Code Build, Circle CI, Jenkins, GitHub, TeamCity, Bamboo, all in the same manner that you've seen demonstrated here with Azure and Circle CI. Just 1 second. Going back to the actual ThunderScan environment, we can create applications to map each project we have in our organization. So if we have an application such as, let's say, it's a specific API application, let's say a banking API, We would select a language, we would select a target for that application, and once that application is created, it will be listed under Applications View, and when creating new scans, you can select a parent application of a scan. So when you select a parent application of a scan, that scan will be assigned to that application. So you will have access to the entire scan history of a specific application. So that is done by assigning a parent application when creating an actual scan. Parent applications can also be assigned post-scanning as well. So by clicking on Change Parent Application, you can assign a specific application to a specific scan. When you have a large number of results, some of the ThunderScan issues can be filtered out by actually specifying, like, filter the vulnerabilities by a specific project file, and it will only display vulnerabilities related to that file. It can display vulnerabilities originating from a specific input source, such as an input variable or an input function. It can filter vulnerabilities by the actual function calls. For example, we have multiple SQL injection vulnerabilities here that land in the same sync function, but originate from different inputs or have a different data flow in the application itself. So if we want to group those vulnerability findings, instead of triaging individual vulnerabilities, we can group them by those sync calls and simply mitigate the vulnerability by, in this case, using prepared statements in SQL injections or a similar behavior. Immediately when you identify a vulnerability to be a false positive, you should make a suppression of that vulnerability so that you do not come across it again when you initiate new scans against the repository or a specific project. The more you do that, go through that triaging process, again, ThunderScan will adapt to the actual process. Let's see here if we forgot to mention anything out of the basic workflow. If this was a multi-language scan, such as I believe we have one here, so in case of multi-language scans, ThunderScan will separate the results per languages. So we have JavaScript and Java in this specific project, so you will be able to review results to a specific language by selecting this drop-down menu here, as ThunderScan will separate those. It will also separate them in actual reports that are generated. So if we generate a report, we can see that it says it's a Java and JavaScript report. It will merge those vulnerability findings together here, but when reviewing results, it will actually say which vulnerability type applies to a specific language. Vincent, how are we with time currently? Are we on the track for the actual practical part?
Okay, I think that if you have already given them the good overview, maybe just to guide them to do one time the simple scanner, I think it's a full purpose for them to get used to. I think.
Of course. I will at this point log into the same instance. I believe everyone has received the access to the ThunderScan cloud instance for this workshop. Can you confirm that everyone got the credentials to access it?
Everyone just using the morning, I giving you one user ID, right? Yes, this is your ID that you are using to access to the URL currently the Bosko is showing you. So let's log in one time to follow what the Bosko is guide you to do, at least you very hands-on.
So when you visit the testing ThunderScan Cloud instance here, you will have your username like user1 and a password of DefenseCode. You will be able to log into the ThunderScan environment. Once you log in, you will see these already finished scans presented here. We created these in case you want to review the results of previously started scans. But once you log in and you want to create a new scan, you will go on the left side and click on New. You will name the scan, or you can let ThunderScan name it based on the target selection, but let's say you name it as My Scan. You will choose the language for the project that you want to analyze, and you will choose a target source. Now, you can choose to analyze one of the already uploaded projects. Here we have projects from 4 different languages uploaded here. We have a C# or a .NET project, we have a Golang language, we have Python, and we have Java. You can choose to upload your own project if you want. So if you have some kind of source code in a zip archive, you can choose to upload it and analyze it if you want. The user accounts are also configured to accept public GitHub repositories. So if you want to analyze a specific public GitHub repository, you can supply a GitHub URL. Or again, you can simply select one of the already uploaded projects. I'm going to select a Python project in this case, let's say, and select a Python language here, and simply hit Start without any additional configuration. ThunderScan will unpack the archive, start the analysis against the project. It will show you the results in the summary view, and you will be able to review those results in scan details here. I see someone is already running a scan. One scan is listed as in queue because currently the setup of the online instance is a queue system. So once this scan finishes, the next one will be started automatically. The one started by user 13 will be started once the scan started by user 12 is finished. So the scan is still ongoing here. I need to check if we maybe have some kind of, it's JavaScript analysis in progress. I see someone started an auto language recognition scan. JavaScript in this project might take a bit longer, so the scan might last a couple of minutes more than the standard analysis. We'll wait a bit. Okay, that scan has finished, and you will see the scan started by user 13 automatically started now that the user 12 scan has been finished. Again, in a ThunderScan environment, in case we deployed but we did not today, we can deploy any number of ThunderScan scanning agents so that these scans could be run in parallel. But right now they will be running in a queue system, so these scans from user 12 and user 13 were run as queued items. User 13 started a scan against Python and JavaScript Node.js application. They selected an auto language recognition as well. JavaScript scans usually take a few seconds longer because they are usually minified JavaScript files that take longer to analyze. Now, due to the assigned role, if you, for example, visit an analytics tab, you will get an error of an unauthorized action because of the role that is assigned as a group scan management user, because you will not be able to see analytics across the whole organization because you are assigned to a specific workshop group here. User 13 scan is now finished. Once the scan is finished, you can review those results through summary details view. The configuration tab will show you what the configuration of the scan was, and the activity tab will show you any actions performed against the scan. Like if you suppress a vulnerability, it will be shown in activity. If you want to review who started a specific scan or stopped a scan, if the scan is stopped mid-running, you can also review that here. Feel free to upload a zip archive project of your own or to scan a public Git repository. I can show you an example. Let's say we take, give me just 1 second to think about it. We'll start a scan against the Ruby project. So I copied the repository URL of a specific Ruby project here. Just 1 second, going back to this environment. Going to select Ruby as the language, new target source. I provided with Git repository of a Ruby project. I hit start, and it will automatically fetch and analyze a Ruby project. So feel free to initiate a scan against public Git repositories if you want as well. I will now log out from the user 1 account just to avoid concurrency use in case the user 1 is having some issues accessing the account. And go back to my own local instance of ThunderScan. Or I can log in with an additional user here. And monitor the activity that you guys are initiating. One thing that I forgot to mention in the demonstration of pipeline integrations is that those scans that we initiated from Azure DevOps or Circle CI are also now visible in the ThunderScan dashboard. So anything started, whether it's from integrations or manually from the web user interface, is always present for review in the ThunderScan dashboard. Now, the best way to integrate ThunderScan into into builds and into pipeline is to connect it as many of familiar systems as possible, such as issue tracking systems, where users can review issues in the environment that is familiar to them. So ThunderScan can also integrate into things like the SERIC report that we mentioned are consumed by GitHub, for example, that can produce code scanning alerts directly in the GitHub environment that will show the same source code highlighting and descriptions, where you can dismiss vulnerabilities directly from a GitHub environment if a user is more familiar with GitHub than he is with ThunderScan, or you can submit those as GitHub issues so that you can review them there. So for a seamless integration, you would basically try to bring it as close to developers as possible, so that they can adapt it quicker as a security tool. I can see someone ran a public repository here, scan. We have 3 vulnerabilities. This actual application takes the user input from the command line, which is technically a false positive result, to avoid a false positive result like this. I mean, it's not a false positive, it's only a false positive if you don't consider a command line as a manipulable user input. You can exclude RGV as an input variable in scan configuration. We also have a hard-coded credentials vulnerability found that has a secret key selected there. But I will leave you to start the scans and review the results yourself.
Anyone at the moment have the difficulty to access to the system based on the user ID given to you? Either you can voice up or you can using the chat just to tell us at least we know who got problem so that the Bosko can help accordingly. So if you already can log in, please continue to finish at least one scan with one scanning till you generate the report to give you the whole process of how you can perform it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Bosko. Here got one question. So I just tell you from Izani, he is asking, can you show again how to submit the report to Jira or Git? Thank you.
Sure thing. So if Jira is configured, in your user accounts, of course, Jira is not configured. You can configure it in settings, but I do not recommend using your own Jira servers for this workshop, just for security reasons. But if Jira is configured, you would actually submit a ticket by selecting this icon here that you see, a ticket icon. When you mouse over it, it will say Submit ALM issue, which is an application life cycle management, and it will display all the supported issue tracking systems. When Jira is configured, ThunderScan automatically fetches those Jira projects and supported issue types, as well as users that can be assigned to a specific issue. If we are talking about automatic submission of issues, we have a trigger here that will automatically submit a report to Jira if a scan results in one or more high-risk vulnerabilities. For example, if I start a scan here and select a target and I say I want to be notified on Jira automatically if the scan results in one or more high-risk vulnerabilities. I will open Jira just to wait up for that ticket. Wait a couple of seconds for the scan to be finished. And we can see that ThunderScan reported a ThunderScan alert for that scan that we ran. It will show the complete summary of the scan per vulnerability type, and it also attached an HTML report of that scan to a Jira ticket. Automatically that is done and automatically submitted, and it also links to the actual scan in ThunderScan if you want to review it there. So that's how Jira triggers work, and the individual issues again are submitted by clicking on Submit an issue to submit an individual vulnerability to one of the supported issue tracking systems. In the workshop environment, of course, when you click on that Submit an issue, these fields will be empty as no Jira or GitHub is configured, or Azure DevOps or Redmine. The integrations that we mentioned can be configured also to specify a trigger you want to use for specific integrations. So, for example, when this build is stopped, ThunderScan is able at the same time to submit a Jira ticket with a complete report of the scan for that build fail to Jira, so that you are notified both in the build system and the issue tracking systems that you have. Through the API, ThunderScan is also capable of submitting individual vulnerability issues for every vulnerability that is found. So you are technically able to submit as many tickets as possible in an automated manner. If you don't want a summary of the scan as a ticket automatically, you can submit all the found issues as individual issues submitted to Jira, so they will be submitted in the form that we've seen like this. This would be an individual issue that shows the summary of an individual vulnerability type with all the related information. If there are any additional questions, please go ahead. If something was unclear or needs to be shown again, please ask.
Yeah, everyone, just to follow the Bosko to encourage you all to talk. In case you don't want to unmute your mic, actually you can using the chat. It's the same, just like what Izani did. So that I will passing all those information to Bosko. He will answer it for you. So for my side, I will be highly encourage you at least you perform one scan because that Bosko already put in all the sample file into the platform for you. You will more easier for you to test. At least you get the real feeling. You can see how all those reports you present, and then how you can manipulate the data according to some of the standards for you. Of course, like what the Bosko just mentioned, you can also put in some other additional source that you want to be in this workshop time. And then for the report, just to make sure that you play around the report, because I think the most important part for everyone today is the report, because you need it to be communicated with, with so many officers, whether it's authority or within your group. So in case you have anything in the team you want to clarify or something you are not clear, not sure, or whatever, Bosko is a very right candidate right now that it can assist you to clarify for you. Thank you.
One thing that I should also mention is that aside from security issues in the code, ThunderScan will also scan for known vulnerabilities in third-party dependencies of a project. So if you are using some kind of an open source dependency in a project, such as JavaScript dependencies, ThunderScan will report those vulnerabilities if your dependencies have known vulnerabilities. ThunderScan extracts the version number of your dependency. It will compare it with a database of known vulnerabilities that is pulled from NIST data feeds, and it will report all of those findings under the third-party dependency check vulnerability type. So not only does the ThunderScan do a source code analysis, it will also do a software composition analysis in terms of security issues in third-party dependencies that are used in the project.
Let me to add in something on top of just the SCA, what the Bosko talk. For this kind of the SaaS product, I'm even fully aware, sometimes some people will charge separately for just the SCA module as the standalone. For ThunderScan, right, as you can see, actually they only put it inside for you, just in case it is something you want to be understanding. Yeah, Bosko, they have one question is coming. They have the participant asking, I still can access to this link after workshop. I believe you will be stopping. I don't know what time. So maybe you just tell them exactly what time they will be cannot be accessed.
Okay, so depending on the needs, we can prolong the use of this instance. I do not have to stop it at the end of this workshop if you want to retain the access for an additional hour, but I believe the instance will be automatically stopped and removed at 12 p.m. Central European time, which would be in an hour and a half from now. So that would give you maybe even an additional hour of playing with the tool once this presentation and the workshop is over. If Vincent is okay with that, we can retain the access if users need it to try out the tool more. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, Izami, I think it's already answered your question so that you can use it until, I think, after the event finish, right? It's about additional, I think, about 15 minutes more. So after the event. If I will highly encourage, if possible, you already play around some of the languages maybe your company is using, because they will be the most likely to giving you the more realistic understood or anything you want to ask, like integration or whatever. So please use this time to really utilizing, because Bosko is perfectly help me to provision everything. You don't need to do anything you can use already. Yeah.
I can also upload additional languages for you. For example, I can upload things like PHP. I'll add a Ruby project there as well as an upload, just in case someone wants to try additional languages. For the scanning, I will upload I can upload classic ASP as well. Even Android projects for Android Java. So that's not Java, that's Android Java when selecting the language. I'll select the iOS as well, which is an Objective-C language. I'll upload the project for that if you want to run that kind of analysis as well. Of course, mobile application vulnerabilities have a different nature than the standard web application or API applications. Mobile vulnerabilities are different. They are mostly based around the insecure practices rather than vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, because that's more of a client side. Mobile applications are more of a client side rather than backend or server side application. Okay, maybe I selected a project that's a bit large. Load is going a bit slower there. Just to mention, ThunderScan is an on-premise solution. So in case of a deployment, you would install ThunderScan in your own environment, in your own network, choose a platform in which you want to install it. It wouldn't be a cloud instance such as this current case or deployment that you are accessing. So it would be deployed in your environment, accessed in your network, etc. We currently do not provide a software as a service licensing model of ThunderScan. It's a completely an on-prem solution, on-premise solution. Of course, you can always deploy it in your own cloud or your own network environment, but we currently do not provide hosted software as a service ThunderScan instances. Also, after the call, if anyone would like to have access to ThunderScan online documentation, I'm sure Vincent can contact DefenseCode support, and we can issue an account to access the ThunderScan online documentation, where there is a complete user guide, API manual, troubleshooting guides, installation manual, integration descriptions, etc. Everything would be present in that user manual.
Yes, everyone, just like follow up what the Bosko mentioned, because usually, like the source code review, of course, the heavy user is one part is the developers. Another part is actually more on the security side, where they start to shift left. In case for the API or certain documentation, you want, just like what the Bosko mentioned, right? Feel free to reaching out just in case you want to confirm how it will be integrated, especially nowadays everyone is CI/CD, the reset of everyone will make the initiative on that, or even for running in the container, all those things. It is all is possible. At the moment, I think that you, I believe everyone should be finished your first now scanning. If you continue to have something you want to ask or whatever, feel free to at least you chat it there, so I will be passing to Bosko to answer for you. If not, then I think we'll just have maybe the Bosko to make use of the time based on some of the scan sample here. Maybe the interpret some of the scan report, and all those thinking is a very common thing usually on the whether it's developer, user, or security officer that you will encounter when the time you scan the report, right? You don't expect those users to be reading themselves, they will fix the problem themselves, right? In case they come to you, like what is the thing? So that I have Bosko to maybe talk about 10 or 15 minutes of reporting, all those things that it can be used for in real life. Thank you.
Okay. I'm currently experiencing some DNS issues on my side. Hopefully the issue will be resolved within a minute, so I won't be able to access the online instance of ThunderScan, but it will come back in a minute for me. But if there are any questions, I will be able to answer them. Also, from a management perspective, like if you have users in your organization that would only like to have summary reports, they do not care about the individual vulnerability details, you would generate only a summary report of an application scan, where they would get this high-level overview, a chart breakdown of risks to see the current security posture of an application. So it would only contain that summarized report of an application. It would not contain all of those details. So you can also have those short technical reports which only show the actual input variable and the actual sync call without showing data flows, in case developers find it easier to go through the report by only reviewing the inputs and the sync calls instead of the entire data flows. But data flows are especially useful when you are actually finding a placement for your mitigation, whether you want to sanitize the user input right away, or is it before the actual passing to the sync function, depending on development practices. You do not have access to an actual analytics reporting capability, but analytics reports can also be generated out of the analytics dashboard that will contain all the analytic information like general statistics, scans per language, static analysis and software composition analysis ratio, remediation progress in the organization, top vulnerability types, and those compliance violations across the whole organization. When it comes to actual compliance reports, for example, if we generate PCI DSS report, the vulnerabilities that are found during the scan will be sorted under specific PCI DSS articles that can be applied to SAST results, things like injection flows, insecure cryptographic storage, improper error handling, cross-site scripting issues, improper access control. Those are all specific PCI DSS violations that will be sorted in PCI DSS reports. Other than that, they would look quite similar to other report formats, but they are PCI DSS oriented. We have a bar chart breakdown of PCI DSS issues here as well. And the report will list those specific article violations of a specific standard when you generate it. The same goes for standards such as OWASP Top 10, where the vulnerabilities would be sorted under OWASP Top 10 articles. All the unsorted vulnerabilities that do not belong to any of the specific articles of a standard would also be present in the report, but they would be under an unsorted category of vulnerabilities. In case your organization uses some kind of a vulnerability management system where reports from different tools are consumed by different solutions, ThunderScan does offer parsable reports such as XML, JSON, and comma-separated values reports. where you can simply generate a JSON report that it will then be consumed by another tool that uses some kind of a custom parser to parse out the ThunderScan results from a JSON report, in case those need to be imported into something else. The serif reports that we mentioned, the serif is a standardized SAST report format that is becoming increasingly popular, especially in tools that have security options such as GitHub itself. Like previously mentioned, GitHub has security issues feature where it can consume serif reports and show those and parse out those reports to show code scanning alerts directly in the GitHub environment. So technically, users would not have to interact with ThunderScan environment at all. Everything will be present in the GitHub environment that is already familiar to them. Serif is going to soon be adopted by environments such as GitLab, and also environments such as Build Systems. Jenkins, I believe, has serif plugins that can consume results from serif reports as well. So different tools will continue supporting that standardized format as well. But of course, you can always use the reports, the user-friendly reports that we generate in HTML and PDF formats directly from the ThunderScan environment. Have any new questions come in, Vincent?
Everyone, we are right now really closing to Q&A times already. So if you, after the Bosko explained on the reporting, because in the earlier you already talked about the integration, in case you have a very specific technology or something, maybe the Bosko is not yet showing or anyhow, you have some concern or whatever, you may feel free to be putting in the chat here so that I can passing the information forward. If you have encountered any problem for doing like what just being guided from scanning to generate the report in whatever format from your scan that in your hand, feel free to rise up also, just in case we will assist you as well. Thank you. Yeah, maybe the Bosko, I think in the very high levels, maybe you just give them like the supported language or programming language, how intensive the ThunderScan right now is covered, or maybe, I don't know, whether coming and what kind of further languages, right? Your site is planned to be integrated further, you know? Yeah. So at least they have some clear pictures, Yeah.
Yep. So ThunderScan supports quite a large number of languages. The frameworks that are supported are automatically recognized when you initiate a scan. So you don't have to select a specific, let's say, a JavaScript framework if you are scanning a JavaScript or Node.js project. You don't have to select a framework that you use in the project that is automatically recognized. But the languages, the language selection that we have is quite wide. I mean, you can For example, anything from mobile applications such as Android, Java, Objective-C, Xamarin, C#, Kotlin Mobile, Swift. All of those are mobile-related applications. They are supported as well. Languages, standard languages such as Java, C#, PHP, Python, Ruby, Visual Basic, .NET, ASP Classic, Visual Basic, WebScript, JavaScript, Node.js, PLSQL, all of those are supported. If you have those in your organization, ThunderScan covers them well. Of course, not all of the languages have same vulnerability types supported because those differ through languages. For example, C, C++ have completely different languages, different vulnerabilities than Java or C# would have, because C++ introduces additional problems such as buffer overflows, time of check, time of use, integer overflows. But the C, C++ analysis in ThunderScan is currently in a beta stage, so that's not a completely stable and accurate analysis like some of the other languages that we support. Vulnerability supported for things like Android, Java, or mobile languages are of a different nature. I'm gonna select here, just 1 second. Let's say an Android project, just to review vulnerability types. So as you can see, they are quite different from what you would expect in a, let's say, a C# project of a web application. So an Android vulnerability are more related to practices such as insecure data storage, insufficient transport layer protection of how you call backend API endpoints, weak encryption strength, vulnerability to man-in-the-middle attacks, arbitrary code injections, insecure application configuration, insecure usage of intents, information vulnerability such as did you intend to use location information, disclose location information, log sensitive information into log messages, etc. So the nature of mobile vulnerabilities is different than the web application vulnerabilities as well, but ThunderScan supports them both. So anything that you currently don't see supported, but your organization uses it, or we haven't demonstrated anything that is part of your pipeline, maybe a specific build system or a specific component in application lifecycle management, please ask a question, and I'm sure we'll be able to clarify it or explain it how it would be applied to your specific case or your specific pipeline in your organization, or the specific languages or frameworks that you use. You can ask if we support a specific framework, and I will be glad to answer that kind of question.
Only after you were thinking of something you want to ask, right? Feel free to submit the thing through email or whatever. We will still compile and then fly you so that no worry about that. Now, I think that we are really very closing to what earlier we are agreeing on by 5 p.m. we're closing. Bosko is okay. I take over this section to closing, and then I give we have a lucky draw. Then we are closing this whole thing.
Yep. Go ahead. Okay,
so this is where we are. From this section, we were giving out travel notebook set, not brown color, in case for illustration purpose, it's in black color. Because it's a company sponsorship item, it will carry emblem company logo. If you have previously access to any of our event before, you will know what notebook that will be passing to the person that who are winning. I will base on currently who is still in the event, then I will base on those names, then I will passing over to doing for the quick random, what is so called, the random name. I need to make sure, after I announce the person that will win, make sure at least you let me know you are still here. So if not, then I got to put it to another person in still. Okay. Mr. Ko, are you here?
Yes, I hear.
Okay, lucky for you, Mr. Ko. So after I will contact you, then the thing I will mail it to you.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's you are lucky. I will say so. They have on top of it, we have this joint certificate that Bosko side and my side will be putting your name, all those things to be certifying you for this 2 hours. I know all of you is doing some continuousity of the professional development in all the certification. You can using it to claim for that 2 hour time for those purposes. We already achieved what we all intend to achieve. I hope so. You're really using this opportunity, not just like a normal, just passively, hear the people talk all the way. But I hope you using this section, you are actually really scan something using your hand to generate a report. At least I think this is a whole purpose for why we and the supplier are interested to arrange this for you, because sometimes certain thing is better you see it by your own eye. Sometimes the thing here, it can be quite easy to do if you're willing to follow those steps and so on. Without further delay, I would like to thank you, Bosko and the DefenseCode from your kind joint sponsor. Bosko, I will compile everything first before I will send it over to your side for them, the call side, the thing back for them. Any further thing, everyone? Bosko, okay, so we're closing the event.
And thank you everyone for attending and for this opportunity for us to present our solution. And I'm glad that some of you had the opportunity to have a hands-on approach on it.
Thank you. So it's appreciate for everyone's efforts to make it happen today. Follow-up material, we will send it to you. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day. Bye-bye.